Consumer spending ended 2024 with strong momentum. That's according to Bank of America Institute's latest consumer checkpoint. In December, spending per household on credit and debit cards increased by 2.2% year over year. That's the strongest monthly growth we've seen since February of last year. Joining us right now is Everett Krisberg. She's the head of the Bank of America Institute. And Liz, when we spoke with you earlier in December, we were all wondering if that spending was actually going to show up. It did.
It showed up. It showed up. It showed up big time. I mean, it was strong going into the end of the year. It was kind of like people were accelerating to get to the end of the year, to the race. And what was interesting is there's two things driving that. One is an old story, services spending. Services spending in December was up 0.5, same level it was in November. People are continuing to pay to have experiences. But the second thing is new, and it's something we haven't talked about in a long time.
Clothing?
Which is, clothing is part of it, but the rebound in retail spending. Retail spending not only turned positive, it's been negative for a while, but was at 1.3%, which is the highest level in almost 2 years. And it was broad-based in terms of what was driving that.
I couldn't believe it when I saw the clothing numbers. That was
the clothing number, 8.5%, exactly. Yeah. But it wasn't just clothing. I mean, clothing was really the standout, but it was general merchandise. It was groceries. So what we're seeing is, and what we saw in December, it'll be interesting to see if it lasts, is this shift and this transition, this rebound back into retail spending. In addition to experiences, though, it's not that they're shifting from services to retail. Both are going up.
What was really interesting about that is they were not mortgaging themselves to do this. They actually had increases in income, and that's why they were able to spend.
Exactly. And I know I say this all the time, but the key to understanding the spending is understanding the labor market. Obviously, we're all going to be paying attention at 8:30. What we look at the Institute in terms of the data to understand the labor market is actually income. So after-tax income coming into consumer accounts. And what we saw there was also very strong. So across all of the income categories, income in December was up about 3%. That's an acceleration from 2% in November. And the big change here, the notable change, is that higher income households at actually 2.9%, but around 3%. That's the highest level we've seen for that group in almost 3 years. And that's then translating into spending.
All right, so we have a jobs number today, and that will give us more to chew over. But this is data that the Fed has to look at and say, okay, maybe we're right to pause and not thinking about further cuts.
Well, we certainly share this data with the Fed, and we're looking at it, and that, that is what the data is telling us. One of the things that I think is also interesting that we take a look at often is how does the data compare to what surveys are saying? Mm-hmm. And confidence, confidence, Michigan, Consumer Board. We have seen confidence increase really since July. And that is obviously translating into the spending. But the driver of the improvement in confidence has really been the question, is now a good time to buy a large household good, right? That's been the driver of the Michigan survey. But when we look at our data, we're actually not seeing that translate into people buying more large household goods. Now,
because they bought so many of them during COVID.
That may be part of it. It may be people might think it's a good time to buy because the Fed cutting rates, financing might be better. They might be thinking, I want to buy ahead of a potential tariff. But the reality is, in our data, the percent, the share of people buying household goods is at the same level it was last year, and it's actually down from 2022. So I think about that as a reminder of why it is so important for us to be looking at the data from 69 million Bank of America consumers as opposed to listening to what they're actually doing, as opposed to listening to what people are saying they're going to do.
Right. And the one thing that kind of jumped out, gas prices was responsible for a 3% increase.
3% increase.
Too. And if you look at the inflation picture along with higher wages, that has to be the thing the Fed worries about.
Yeah, I think on gas prices, it's important to note, I don't know if you filled up your tank recently, but gas prices are ticking back up again. Yeah. But in December, the average in December was actually below November. So that 3% growth wasn't driven by prices.
People actually traveling?
In December, it was people traveling.
Okay, that's an excellent point, too.
Yeah.
But fair notice that, look, everything you're seeing goes along with this idea that the Fed should not be cutting rates again.
That's the story that it's telling. I mean, the consumer is still strong, and it is accelerating. So you're seeing wages increase, you're seeing spending increase. It's a strong story.
Liz, thank you.
Great to be here. Thanks.
We appreciate it.
It is just